Hey guys, how's it going? Island Prepper here. I had a buddy ask me to, who's gun to, excuse me, who's new to gun ownership, asked me to build him a holster. He was kind of interested in the crossbreed style of holsters, so I grabbed some leather up and I'm going to make him one. The pistol he's got is a Smith & Wesson Sigma. It's one of the lower end of the pistols, but it's his first gun. He needed it for self-defense, home defense, and it runs pretty good, it shoots pretty straight, and the price, you can't beat it. So anyway, besides going and training at the range all the time, he said he's going to need a holster for concealed carry, so I'm going to build him a crossbreed style of holster. I don't have Kydex, so I'm going to build the Kydex part of the crossbreed holster out of leather. And it's not going to be interchangeable, unfortunately, but you got to excuse me, I'm pretty sick, but it'll wind up being pretty nice, I think, for a finished product. So what I have here is your basic piece of leather to start out with to put a backer for it, for the back of the holster. What I did was, and I don't know if you guys can see the lines there, but I drew me a basic design. I'm going to take my razor knife and I'm going to cut the basic design out for the backing, and after that I'm going to make me a front part out of tooling leather. It's vegetable hide tooling leather, and what I'll do is cut me a long strip to hold the gun similar to this inside the holster. There'll be two belt clips, one here and one in here, to hold the pistol against the pants and the holster against you. So it'll be a tuckable design. You can tuck your shirt in around it if you want to, and I'm hoping it'll come out pretty good. Like I said, the tooling leather is going to slide somewhere over like this to cover the trigger, because these Sigmas don't really have too much of a safety on it. They're almost like a Glock. The safety's in the trigger. It's a dual stage trigger, but anyway, it should turn out pretty good. So if you want to hang out, watch me on this leather making video and not get too bored. And if you got any questions, submit them down in the comment section below, and I'll get to them back as fast as I can. But basically, I'm going to take a razor knife. I have my design cut out here, and I'm going to start cutting on it. I like to make long edges when I can. I already started cutting a little bit, but to cut it off kind of flush and run your edge all the way out to the end of the leather. It's kind of hard to make swooping turns with a razor knife. I don't have all the leather working tools that I really need to do all the leather working that I want to do. Plus, I just kind of started it. This is about my third holster I've made, and I'll put some pictures of the other ones that I made up in the video later. But so I'm still kind of relatively new at this and buying tools as I go. So, but like I said, just take your knife, cut your leather. Cuts pretty easy. This is about 4 to 5 ounce leather. They sell it in weights, so about this thickness is about 4 ounces or so. It goes on up to 10 ounces or however much you want. You can usually get all the leather you want to off a Tandy leather supply. If you Google that, it'll pull up their leather supply shop, and you can order whatever you need. Now, this is not tooling leather here. This is actually just straight cowhide dyed leather. It's just dyed brown, just regular leather. That's all it is. You can't really tool it too much, and you can't wet form it. That's why you have to buy the tooling leather. There's this specific leather that you have to have, and it's called tooling leather, and it's a vegetable hide leather, vegetable dyed leather. It comes out light brown, and you're gonna have to dye it. Actually, here's a piece of it right here, and what it does whenever it gets wet, it'll actually form to whatever it is that you're forming it around. It's called boning it in, but I'll show you all that later in the video. Here's some dye that I purchased, and it kind of matches up with the brown. It's not too different of a color, but I'm actually thinking about just going with black and dyeing the tooling leather part of the holster black, and it'll have black clips, black leather part where it holds the firearm, and then another black holster clip right there, so it'll hold it to your pants. But I'll finish cutting this out and I'll show you guys that. There we go. I like to always save my scraps, because you don't never know what kind of scraps you're going to need. This piece actually right here was a scrap earlier. So there's my basic design. It's going to, like I said, hold the firearm about like that against him, and there'll be another piece across here. But it's pretty comfortable. I actually have a White Hat holster, is the name brand of it, that I wear with one of my pistols, and it works out pretty well. It's pretty comfortable. This thing looks like it's going to be a pretty large, unruly holster, but when it forms to your skin, it's going to hang out about like that, and wraps around pretty comfortably, and I actually don't mind driving in it. I'm a little guy, and this is a big holster, and it fits, and it's comfortable, and I wear it with tucked in shirts quite often. So okay, so the next phase of this is going to be cutting out a pattern for the tooling leather. Whenever I go to wet form it and figure out exactly how I want it to set with the gun. So that about right there. Okay, so here is my vegetable tanned hide leather. It's a little bit stiffer than the other leather, which is fine. I want the stiffness to translate into retention for this pistol, so it doesn't slide in and out super easy. Basically what I did was I went on to Tandy, the website, and bought a skirt, which is the belly portion of the cow, for about $20. There's about 5 or 6 square feet. Some of the leather can get really expensive. A whole side of tooling leather can cost about $200 or so. So I went cheap and bought the belly, and the belly's not the best of the leather, I'll be honest with you, but for the price that I was willing to pay and just getting started in this leather working stuff, that's all that I wanted to invest. So basically what I did was I cut a little portion of it off here, and I'm going to match it up to the firearm to see where I need to cut a smaller piece out of this to encapsulate the firearm and make the retention part of this holster. So this is a little bit heavier weight. If you can see here, this is about 7 or 8 ounce, maybe 6 to 8 ounce leather. It's pretty thick. Hopefully it'll wet form pretty well, and it'll wind up being a pretty good holster for the guy. A lot of these holsters are made with Kydex. I don't have a Kydex press. I don't have a vacuum form. I don't have a heat. I don't have anything to do Kydex. So I'm building this hybrid holster out of complete leather. I've never seen one like it, but I imagine it'll work the same. I don't know. We'll find out. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see how big of a piece that I'm going to need. This is going to fold over and hold a rivet. I'm not going to sew it. And it's going to fold over the gun like this. And I'm going to have to cut this down a whole lot, but I'm just kind of getting a general impression of where the leather is going to wind up on this thing. I've got to leave room right in here for my belt clips, which I also got from Tandy. Here they are in the package. But they're just pretty simple little belt clips, and I'll show you how I put those on here in a little bit. I'm going to mark it with my thumbnail there, kind of just a quick cheap mark. That way it comes down past the trigger guard and it's going to stop right around in here somewhere. The bottom of the barrel will wind up coming out, which is fine. It's not going to hurt anything. And so I need to make basically a U through the leather with the knife and cut some of this extra off, because it's just going to get in the way. So I recommend, what I've kind of learned in the past here, is just square it off and take a little bit at a time. That way you're not cutting too much of it out. Leather's a lot like wood. You measure twice and cut once, you know, because you can't get it back once you cut it out and lose the piece that you cut. So there we go. That ought to work pretty doggone well, I think. I'm gonna have to square this side up a little bit, but I think it's gonna work out pretty well. Square this out a little bit. Alright, there's my basic shape of it there, or the basic square of it there, rectangle. Make sure it's exactly what I want before I start wet forming it, because once you start wet forming it, you can remold it once you wet form it, but it's kind of pain in the butt. So I really would only like to do this once. That's about where I want it. Alright, I'm going to go get some wet forming supplies, which kind of consists of a little bit tub of water, and I'll start wet forming it. Alright, we're back. Now what you have to do to form this tooling leather is you have to get it wet. This is pretty thick, so it needs to be soaking wet, and what I've got here is a bowl of water. Basically just put your leather inside of it, get it wet. I probably should have got a bigger bowl, but I wasn't trying to make too much of a mess. Just make sure it's good and wet. When you're tooling, what I mean by tooling is making designs on the leather with stamps and things of that nature. What you want to do is just soak the outside of it just a little bit with a damp sponge. You don't want to get it too wet when you're doing that. But when it comes to wet forming, you really, I've found that I like it wet. Even though it takes a little bit to dry, it gives you a lot of time to be able to form the leather over whatever you're wanting to form it over. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by pressing it in to the gun and making a general impression of the firearm like this. And what I'm doing with my finger here is I'm pushing it inside the trigger guard. What that's going to do is this little indentation here, I'm not sure if you can see it on camera yet, but this indentation here is what's going to create your retention on the holster. That way you can put your firearm in and out of it and have it not fall out of it if you're laying down or whatever angle that your body may be in. But what I like to do is hold it like this for a little bit and kind of make sure it kind of takes form and takes shape. You can see already that it's already trying to take form and take shape over the firearm. You don't want it too tight around your outside edge here because your sight is going to get in the way. You're going to need to be able to put your sight down in there and make sure that your front sight post can clear this. A lot of people will tape a dowel rod or a pencil or something to the firearm. That way it gets it gets a channel to where it can go in there on there like it needs to. And come to think of it, I may do that also.